Good morning and welcome to worship at Bart Centenary United Methodist Church. We're so glad you came. This morning, our reading is broken into three different sections: Genesis 24, 34 to 38, Genesis 24, 42 to 49, and Genesis 24, 58 to 67. Hear the word of the Lord. To put our reading into context, what has already happened before we pick up is that Abraham has called a servant to his side, and he has asked this servant to go to where he had come from, where his people still lived, and to go back there and find a wife for Isaac. He has given him instructions on how to do that, and he has sent him on his way. The servant arrives just as we pick up. At verse 34. So he said, I am Abraham's servant. The Lord has greatly blessed my master, and he has become wealthy. He has given him flocks and herds, and silver and gold, male and female slaves, camels and donkeys. And Sarah, my master's wife, bore a son to my master when she was old, and he has given him all that he has. My master made me swear, saying, You shall not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites, in whose land I live, but you shall go to my father's house, to my kindred, and get a wife for my son. The servant continues to tell his story in Genesis 24, 42 to 49. I came today to the spring and said, O Lord, the God of my master Abraham, if now you will only make successful the way I am going. I am standing here by the spring of water. Let the young woman who comes out to draw, to whom I shall say, Please give me a little drink of water from your jar to drink, and who will say to me, Drink, and I will draw water for your camels also. Let her be the woman whom the Lord has appointed for my master's son. Before I had finished speaking in my heart, there was Rebekah, coming out with her water jar on her shoulder, and she went down to the spring and drew. I said to her, Please let me drink. She quickly let down her jar from her shoulder and said, Drink, and I will also water your camels. So I drank, and she also watered the camels. Then I asked her, Whose daughter are you? She said, The daughter of Bethuel, Nahor's son, whom Milcah bore to him. So I put a ring on her nose and the bracelets on her arms. Then I bowed my head and worshipped the Lord, and blessed the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, who had led me by the right way to obtain the daughter of my master's kinsman for his son. Now then, if you will deal loyally and truly with my master, tell me, and if not, tell me, so that I may turn either to the right hand or to the left. The family negotiates with the servant of Abraham, and they come to an agreement that they will allow Rebekah to go to Abraham and to marry Abraham's son, Isaac. And Rebekah agrees to do this, but the family would like her to stay, and the servant of Abraham would like to get going right away. And so, after this question, they leave it up to Rebekah, and this is where we begin. Genesis 24:58. And they called Rebekah and said to her, Will you go with this man? And she said, I will. So they sent away their sister Rebekah and her nurse, along with Abraham's servant and his men, and they blessed Rebekah, and they said to her, May you, our sister, become thousands of myriads. May your offspring gain possession of the gates of their foes. Then Rebekah and her maids rose up, mounted the camels, and followed the man. Thus the servant took Rebekah and went on his way. Now, they have a long journey. They finally get back to where Abraham and Isaac are. And this is where our next set of texts begin at verse 62. Now Isaac had come from Beer Lahai Roi and was settled in the Negev. Isaac went out in the evening to walk in the field, and looking up he saw camels coming. And Rebekah looked up, and when she saw Isaac, she slipped quickly from the camel, and said to the servant, "Who is the man over there, walking in the field to meet us?" The servant said, "It is my master." So she took her veil and covered herself. And the servant told Isaac all the things he had done. Then Isaac brought her into his mother Sarah's tent. He took Rebekah, and she became his wife, and he loved her. So Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. As we continue our summer quest, discovering what we can from our spiritual family tree, we continue to seek what truth about God and our relationships with God that we can learn from the stories in Genesis. Today, we explore the story of Isaac and Rebekah, and we discover a love story. It's not the typical boy meets girl that we might be familiar with. Instead, it's more of a father tasks the servant with finding a girl, servant travels, servant prays, God answers by providing said girl. Girl and her family agree for girl to marry boy and live in a far-off land. Then girl and servant travel. Girl finally meets boy, and they live happily ever after. But there is much more to this strange love story than what we see on the surface. If we dig deep into the story, we begin to puzzle out the hidden gems that are found within it. Inside, we uncover faith and courage and love, and we are reminded of the trustworthiness of our God. First in this story, we see faith. We see Abraham's faith in God's ability to bring the bride his son needs. He has so much faith in God's ability to provide such a girl that he doesn't need to go along on the journey or have his son along on this trip. Abraham wants a wife for his son who believes in the God he has faith in, and so he sends a servant to the place where the remainder of his own family presides. This new wife will, along with Abraham's son Isaac, be the receptor of the promise Abraham received by God. The faith that we see in Abraham's servant seems to reflect that of Abraham himself. While the servant is overwhelmed with the task that he has been set, he doesn't hesitate to turn to God in prayer. He counts on God to guide him in his choices. In this story, we also see courage. Courage is revealed first in the servant. He travels quite a distance with 10 camels full of wealth to sweeten the deal for the family of the bride that he is seeking for Isaac. Traveling with that much wealth would have put quite a target on the traveling group. We also see courage in young Rebekah. She has been taught the value of hospitality that was and is so important in the Middle Eastern cultures. She did not shy away from the hard work. It would take more than a few trips to the well to water a man and his 10 camels. The text tells us also that she's beautiful, but what becomes apparent through her actions is that she is courageous. It takes a great deal of courage to go to a strange place, to marry a man you do not know beyond the servant who was sent by his father. And yet, she does this. And then we get to love. Isaac's story has always been a story of love. He was a longed-for child, a promised child, long waited for, born of a miracle in his mother's old age. If ever a child was loved, it was he. For his first 4 decades of his life, we can only imagine how his mother had loved and cared for him. And so, we can fairly assume that his mother's death must have been a devastating loss for him, even at age 40. The text tells us the love he found with Rebekah comforted him in his grief. And Rebekah and Isaac, despite or more likely because of their strange beginning, were a love match. The text says, "Then Isaac brought her into his mother Sarah's tent. He took Rebekah, and she became his wife, and he loved her." That love will be important to remember as we continue to go throughout this series. So, through Isaac and Rebekah's love story, we learn more about what it means for the people of God to have faith in God. We learn that that kind of faith takes courage, and that love is an important component in our interaction with God, in God's interaction with us, and in our interaction with one another. This text also reinforces 3 lessons that we have already learned about God in our trek through Genesis. It reinforces that God is trustworthy, that God keeps his promises, and that God cares about the details of our lives. So much that we can go to God about those details, and God will respond. We need only have the faith, the courage, and the love to trust him. Let us learn these lessons well from our spiritual ancestors. May we display such faith, courage, and love in our pursuit of living lives as children of God. Amen.